Nobody knew something was there until everything went quiet. It was late at night, and the USS Roosevelt was doing a regular patrol near the Spratly Islands. Two fighter jets were flying above, practicing drills together. One was a British Typhoon, and the other was an American F-35. Everything seemed normal with clear skies and good communication between the pilots. Then suddenly, the Typhoon's radar screen went blank. It was not broken or jammed. It just showed nothing. Captain Morgan was watching from the ship's command center and noticed something strange. He remembered seeing an unknown aircraft on radar just 1 minute earlier at 50,000 feet altitude. Now it had completely disappeared. The British pilot responded with confusion in his voice. He said he had no visual contact and nothing showing on his instruments. They were looking for something that had simply vanished into thin air. What they did not know was that China had been secretly testing a new stealth fighter jet called the J-35. American intelligence reports had said this aircraft was not ready for real missions yet. They believed its engines were not good enough and its stealth coding was unreliable. Those reports were from a few months ago. Tonight was completely different. The American pilot, Lieutenant Avery, asked permission to use infrared tracking systems. These heat-seeking sensors should detect any aircraft nearby. But even with infrared turned on, they found nothing. Not even heat from jet engines. This should have been impossible. The British pilot Shaw suddenly reported something alarming through the radio. She said that something had just flown past her at extremely high speed. There was no visual sighting and no heat signature detected. The ship went silent as everyone realized they were dealing with something completely new. China had secretly deployed the J-35 for the first time. It had taken off from a hidden floating platform disguised as fishing vessels in the South China Sea. The Chinese military called this mission Operation Skyveil. The aircraft was not there to attack. It was there to watch and study NATO forces without being detected. The Typhoon's radar flickered again briefly. Shaw shouted that she had spotted something above her position. But when she turned to look, there was nothing visible. Avery thought it might be a decoy or false signal. But an analyst on the Roosevelt said it was not electronic warfare. It was a real aircraft. What made the J-35 terrifying was not its weapons or speed. It was how completely silent and invisible it could become. Unlike American stealth jets, this aircraft used special materials designed specifically to avoid NATO radar frequencies. It was not just hiding. It was learning and recording everything. While the NATO jets practiced their maneuvers, the J-35 was recording their tactics. While they simulated attacks, it was studying their response patterns. The British pilot suddenly felt something strange. She told Avery that something was following them closely. Avery confirmed he felt it too. They both realized the invisible aircraft was watching them from very close range. Then they heard a low boom sound through their radios. It was not from any missile. It was a sonic signature, a controlled burst of power. The message was clear. The J-35 was saying it could have attacked them anytime it wanted. Before either NATO pilot could react, the aircraft disappeared completely. No radar contact, no heat signature, nothing but disturbed air. Both jets landed safely back on the Roosevelt. Neither pilot was smiling. Avery stepped off looking shaken. Shaw removed her helmet slowly and stared at the sky. She said they had not been fired upon or threatened directly. Yet she had never felt more hunted in her entire career. Inside the command briefing room, military leaders examined 3 radar images. Each showed a brief blip that appeared and vanished. The trajectory was unmistakable. The unknown aircraft had flown through both jets' defensive zones twice. The admiral asked how close it had come. Avery said he had not seen it visually, but he felt the air pressure change around his aircraft. Shaw confirmed it had overtaken them from behind and then again from the side. If it had wanted to attack, it would not have needed permission. Avery added that it wanted them to know it could reach them anytime. An intelligence analyst showed thermal data from Philippine naval ships. They had detected a supersonic object, but its heat signature dropped below detection at lower altitude. Captain Morgan said this matched a theoretical scenario they had studied in 2024. They had simulated a stealth drone that could mask its heat signature using advanced technology. The prototype had failed back then, but this looked like a working version. The admiral asked if they were certain it was Chinese. The analyst said it was unconfirmed, but they had no other explanation. She played a computer simulation based on all the sensor data. It showed a black dot moving between the jets, passing just 800 meters below the Typhoon at one point. The calculated trajectory showed incredible agility. The analyst said whoever was flying it had been toying with them. A young British officer whispered that this must be the J-35, the carrier-based stealth fighter China had been developing. Avery agreed, but noted that China's new aircraft carrier was not finished yet. The British officer suggested maybe they did not need a carrier anymore. Later that night, Shaw reviewed her cockpit camera footage repeatedly. She paused on one frame that showed a brief flash. It revealed a shape with swept wings and curved air intakes. The design was elegant and clearly meant to be invisible unless the pilot chose to reveal it. Meanwhile, in Beijing, a Chinese military commander sat in a dark room watching 4 screens. Each showed footage from different angles: the Typhoon, the F-35, the Roosevelt, and a satellite above. The J-35 pilot had transmitted everything back to headquarters. Every signal, every maneuver, every response time had been recorded. A junior officer suggested they should have fired their weapons. They had weapon lock on the NATO jets. The commander disagreed calmly. He said they had done exactly what was needed. The Americans would now spend months writing new defensive procedures, and China would spend weeks learning how to counter those procedures. NATO commanders, military chiefs, and technical advisors met at a secure base in Japan. Even British intelligence sent representatives. This was no longer just curiosity. It was about containment and response. They analyzed one frame where the F-35's own sensors had detected a ripple in space, something that should not have existed. A U.S. Space Force lieutenant explained that this was not just stealth technology. It was active spectral bending. When asked to explain, he said the aircraft was invisible not just to radar, but to light, infrared, and even gravitational waves. It had erased its own shadow. Someone said that should be impossible. The lieutenant replied it had been impossible until last week. Colonel Shaw stood up to speak. She said the aircraft had perfect attack position twice during the encounter. It could have fired weapons easily, but it chose not to, and that fact scared her more than anything else. A NATO director named Henry Clemens spoke from the back of the room. He said 10 years ago, everyone had dismissed Chinese military technology as inferior copies. But while Western forces measured heat signatures and radar returns, China had been studying human perception and psychology. They had not built this aircraft to fight the same way. They built it to make opponents doubt everything they knew. The footage played again on screen. The Typhoon had turned left. The F-35 had climbed higher, and between them, something had moved deliberately, just visible enough to be noticed briefly. An RAF commander said it had not jammed their systems or blinded them. It had played with them psychologically. Clemens corrected him. He said it had shown restraint, and that was far worse than aggression. Later that day, American pilots tried to replicate the J-35's maneuvers in flight simulators. They failed every time. The turn radius was impossibly tight, under 200 feet. Traditional thrust vectoring could not achieve this. One trainer suggested it might be using plasma edge redirection technology that would require exotic materials and bleeding edge technology that only existed in theory. In an underground facility in western China, the real J-35 sat hidden beneath pressurized hangars. Its paint was not just dark-colored. It was smart material that adjusted its reflectivity during flight. Its wings could flex slightly mid-flight, and its onboard artificial intelligence was trained not just on combat tactics, but on psychological response patterns. It knew how humans react to being stalked in silence. The pilot stood nearby, speaking quietly with his commander. When asked how the Americans responded, the pilot smiled slightly. He said they blinked first. Back in the NATO control room, Admiral Tolson said they had a choice. They could treat this like a weapon or like a message. Avery shook his head and said he believed it was both. News began leaking to the media. The Royal Air Force denied any security breach. The Pentagon issued a vague statement about unexpected maneuvers. But on defense websites and forums, the phrase J-35 began trending. People shared blurry screenshots and unconfirmed analysis. One phrase kept appearing repeatedly. You cannot stop what you never saw. The real fear was not that China had caught up technologically. The fear was that China had moved ahead while staying invisible. At 4:16 in the morning over the Philippine Sea, silence became more terrifying than sound. Lieutenant Mason Hale was leading 3 F-35s on routine patrol near Guam. His systems were working perfectly. Then suddenly his radio went silent. He lost visual contact with one of his wingmen. His helmet display flickered, not from equipment failure, but as if something had crossed his field of vision faster than sensors could detect. In a command room in Hawaii, analysts watched in real time as one F-35 simply disappeared from their screens. Then it reappeared 5 miles away, facing the opposite direction. Everyone stood up at once, wondering what had just happened. It was not a teleport or equipment malfunction. It was control and dominance. Hale saw it for the first time then. Just a shimmer, a blur of refracted light as the sun caught something for half a second. In that moment, he realized he was not the hunter. He was being hunted. He rolled his aircraft into a hard dive, pulling extreme G-forces, trying to break visual contact. His wingmen fired defensive countermeasures, but there was nothing to lock onto. Ship sensors detected vapor trails, but only from the American jets. Whatever was trailing them left no heat, no radar return, and no sonic boom, despite flying faster than the speed of sound. One sailor whispered it was like chasing a ghost. Hours later, Hale sat on the deck with his helmet at his feet and his hands shaking. He said they had built the F-35 to dominate fifth-generation threats. But what they encountered was not playing by those rules anymore. In Washington, an emergency closed session was called. When asked where the aircraft went and how it broke weapon lock at close range, a scientist named Dr. Elliot Ray explained calmly. He said it did not break the lock. It predicted the lock and never let the missile system complete its targeting chain. It anticipated engagement timing like playing chess, but in milliseconds. That aircraft thinks in moves we have not studied yet. The next morning, news headlines reported U.S. pilots facing unknown threats in the Pacific. Defense experts speculated this meant the beginning of a new military doctrine. The old model of air dominance through visibility and deterrence was dying. The new one involved silent incursion, invisible leverage, and psychological warfare. In a remote airfield in Tibet, the J-35 taxied slowly toward a shadowed hangar. The pilot climbed down expressionless. Technicians around him spoke in urgent whispers. They were not celebrating. They were adjusting and improving and planning the next test. The pilot removed his helmet and said 4 words. Let them wonder more. And they did wonder. Because nothing was more terrifying than a future where the sky went silent and the enemy was already behind you before you even knew they were there. What should the next generation of fighter jets prioritize? Invisibility or unpredictability? Share your thoughts and subscribe to see what comes next.